Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to Visordown, welcome to Valencia and the launch of Triumph's new Scrambler 400X and the Speed 400. These are two hugely important bikes for Triumph. They are launching them into the A2 middleweight class, so they'll be going into battle with things like KTM Dukes, BMW G310 GS's and G310s, and the TVS Apache, MT-03s. It's a hyper competitive market. Maybe not so much in the UK, but in places like Asia where these kind of bikes are the staple, they're what people go to. They don't really go to the 125s, they step straight onto these. These are a really big deal. So what have we got? We've got an ambulance, that's what we've got. The Speed 400, the more road focused bike, this is coming in under £5,000. Yes, that is a Triumph, brand new for under 5 grand, so it's 4,995. The Scrambler 400X comes in at £5,595. So comparing those to some of the other bikes in the market, probably one of the most popular is the KTM Duke 390. It undercuts the MT-03, and the only real thing that you could compare it to in this sector is the Royal Enfield Himalayan, the 450 that we just rode back in the Himalayas a couple of months ago. That is the only thing that undercuts them, and it is only very slightly, but that is more of a competitor to the Scrambler 400X because of its off-road designation. So I'm going to take you through everything that you need to know about them and tell you how they've been to ride out here in Valencia. So what have we got? Powering both bikes is exactly the same 398cc engine. So we've got 40 horsepower or 39 bhp, and we've got 23 pound-foot of torque from the single cylinder double overhead cam liquid cooled engine. It's the first single cylinder from Triumph for a very long time, and they've worked with a real industry leader in Bajaj to actually produce and create the engine. So it's not been built by Bajaj and white labelled as a Triumph engine. Triumph have actually gone to them with a set of specifications, a set of requirements for the engine, and they've both worked collaboratively to create the motor. It isn't the most powerful thing in the world, but it does feel very peppy. We've got a 6-speed gearbox and a slip-assisted clutch. The gearing on both of the bikes is quite short, so you do go through the gears quite quickly. What that does is it accentuates the feeling of acceleration when you're riding it. So it makes the most of the power and also the torque. It makes it quite an engaging thing to ride because you're always having to dance around on the gear lever to make sure that you're in the perfect gear for the exit of the corner so you can get the absolute most out of the bike. The chassis of the two bikes is where they really do differ. So the frame of them looks the same, but it's actually not. The frame on the Scrambler 400X that you can see to my left here is actually slightly longer in the headstock, so it increases the overall length of the bike, and this is a bit more sit up and beg on the Speed 400. The Scrambler 400 also obviously has got a bit of off-road ability with it, so it's got a 19-inch front wheel, it's got longer travel suspension, and it is shod with Metzeler Karoo Street tyres, whereas the Speed 400 gets Metzeler Roadtech RRs. Out on the road, the handling of the two is very different. So obviously the Speed 400 is a more lively bike to ride on the road. It turns in much faster. It feels like it accelerates quicker, and you've got much more grip on the road from those Metzeler hoops. All in all, this is a very entertaining bike on the road. We have had an absolute hoot on it. The roads have been perfect, as you'd expect out here in Valencia. We had a little bit of city riding earlier on in the day, and then went off up and had a play in the mountains on some beautiful winding Spanish roads with perfect surface and lots of camber in all of the right places. And it feels like a properly well sorted bike. Suspensions from Shah, we've got 43mm forks with 140mm of travel on the Speed 400. And we've got the same forks with 150mm of travel on the Scrambler 400X. We've got no adjustability at the front, and we've got manual preload adjustability on the rear shock absorber. The suspension overall is very good. You don't feel either of these bikes falling through the stroke of the suspension when you hammer on the brakes quite hard into a corner. So they're very nice and composed. Obviously you get more composure with this because it's slightly firmer and it's got less travel, but they both handle on the road absolutely brilliantly. Even the Scrambler 400 with its slightly higher centre of gravity and its longer travel suspension. Another area of difference between the two, we've got Vibray 4-piston calipers on both of the machines, but you've got a 300mm disc on the Speed 400 and you've got a 320mm disc on the Scrambler 400X. The Scrambler 400X also gains a different pad compound, so the bigger disc, and it's got a much harder pad compound, and that transforms the brake lever feel. So the brake on this is very, very progressive. Maybe, for me, maybe slightly too progressive, but I've heard that these bikes have only got a couple of 100 miles on them, so that the brakes are still effectively bedding in. This one has got a very soft lever feel, and you have to really modulate the lever, pull it right back to the bar to get the power of it. The Speed 400 brake is much, much sharper and much more precise. And I'd actually prefer the compound of these pads in the Speed 400 just to sharpen up the braking a little bit on that front. So I am going to just focus on the Scrambler 400X for a minute, because like I said, we did have a little bit of an intro into how it rides off-road. So I'm just going to tell you what I found with it. Straight off the bat, you can roll up the dirt trail, you can turn the traction control off, you can turn the ABS off, and you are ready to ride off-road. There's not a massive amount of messing around required. 40 odd horsepower. It isn't the fastest bike in the world, and you do have to work quite hard to get the back end step out. You've got Karoo street tyres, so they are sort of road legal 70/30 knobbly road tyres, but you do have to get your weight over the front and really hammer the throttle or dump the clutch to get the back end step out and step round. So in that respect, it makes it quite a good bike for a new rider. It would be interesting to see if Triumph get these at their adventure experience in Spain and Wales as a kind of an entry level bike, as opposed to the Scrambler 900. It's a very easy to ride bike. The only thing is the pace rises when you're riding on dirt. I did find that the front end gets a little bit nervous, and there was a couple of times going into a tighter turn on the dirt specifically that the front end felt like it was about to tuck, and I had to correct it and straighten up and sort of sit the bike up a little bit. So that is just off-road. When you're on the road, the handling of them is both super solid, super sure-footed, and very, very nice. Gonna just briefly talk about the electronics, because as you'd expect at this point in the market, there isn't a great deal going on. We have got a very smart looking analog dash with a little LCD cluster that takes you through all your trips and your information, your range to empty and all the rest of it. And on the Speed 400, you can turn off the traction control. On the Scrambler 400X, you can turn off the traction control and you can disable the ABS. So the ABS has got a specific off-road setting on this anyway, but you can actually go in, turn that off, and then you'll have no ABS, the front wheel or the rear wheel. It's all very easy to do. You've just got a single button on the left-hand switch cube, and on the electronics front, that is it. You don't get any quick shifter, you've got no cornering ABS, and there's no other modes to change. It's just the traction control and the switchable ABS. You can turn the ABS off on the Speed 400, but to do that, you basically have to do a burnout, and that will disable the ABS. We've done probably around about 110 miles today, and probably 5 to 10 miles of off-road riding. There was a short kilometre stretch where we did some photographs, and then there was a bit further that you could go off down the trail and just have a little bit of a play on them. The comfort of both bikes generally is quite good. They both have characteristic single cylinder buzz to them. So once you're up at motorway cruising speed, you're quite high in the RPM range, so you do get a little bit of buzz, not so much through the bars or through the pegs, but you can just feel it resonating. It's not too bad. I didn't have any numb fingers when we pulled in at lunch this afternoon after about 60 or 70 miles on the road. Both of them feel super, super roomy. So they are, you know, they're small to mid capacity bikes that are in the A2 market. They can sometimes feel a little bit cramped. I mean, we've got some quite tall people on this launch. Obviously, I'm not one of them, but nobody else has been complaining about feeling cramped. They both feel super roomy. You've got a taller seat on the Scrambler 400X than you have on the Speed, but they're both super accessible still. I'm almost flat foot on the floor on the 400X, and I am flat foot on the floor on the Speed 400. Weight-wise, they are both very, very light. So we've got 170 kg quoted for the Speed, and we've got 179 kilograms for the Scrambler 400X. I'm going to just mention the gearbox as well, because we've been riding these bikes all day today, both of them, and I think I've probably had to use the clutch, other than when I come up to a stop or a red traffic light, or when I need to get off the bike, probably only use the clutch 2 or 3 times, because the gearbox on them is a peach if you are shifting, especially going up the box. It's absolutely brilliant. You've got a really precise gear lever feel. There's not a massive long throw on it. Little blip of the throttle and you'll be into the next gear. The only thing that if you are going to not use the clutch when you're shifting gears, occasionally when you're coming down the box and you're going into first gear for a tight hairpin, occasionally I would catch neutral on the way down. So if you are going to be doing that, just make sure that you're really, really positive with the gear lever and you give it a good old boot with your left foot. Right, I'm going to go on to the verdict now. So Triumph have created these bikes. They've not been in this marketplace before. They've not built a single cylinder bike for, God knows, probably getting on for 30 or 40 years. And they have done a stellar job. This is one of the most hotly contested areas in the global motorcycle market. There is a lot of sales at stake here, so Triumph have had to really pull their socks up, roll their sleeves up and do a good job, and they have absolutely nailed it. Compared to the competition, things like the KTM Duke, the MT-03, this just feels very distinctly different. It sort of adds an air of class to that A2 middleweight sector that you don't get with any of the Japanese or any of the other European brands. What Triumph have managed to do is they've made a bike which, at under £5,000 for the Speed 400 to my right here, is what you would call a very cost-effective way of buying a motorcycle. You could translate cost-effective to being budget or cheap, but the way that Triumph have built it, the way that they've developed it, and the way that they've made the thing handle and the way they've made it ride, it does not feel budget or cheap whatsoever. It doesn't look it. The coatings on the engine are beautiful. The paintwork is really nice. They hide all of the wires, so there's no cables routed anywhere. You can't see any pipes or wires going through. There isn't a regulator rectifier sticking out the side of the bike. It's all packaged just like you would want from a Triumph, like you'd expect from a Triumph, and they've done a really very good job with that. They've made what could be a cost-effective and a cheap motorcycle not feel cheap at all or budget in any way, shape or form. Hats off to them. They might have already won A2 Bike of the Year in my mind, and we are only at the end of January, so cracking job Triumph, well done. Okay folks, so there we have it. That is the launch of the new Triumph 400 models, done and dusted. I've been told you are watching Visordown. If you like the video, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you can stay up to date with all of our latest videos. And for the latest news, reviews and motorcycle features, get yourself over to visordown.com. Cheers.